Hi, my name is Lee Carter, and we had several weeks ago an introduction to the parables. And so what we're going to do today is continue with the parable of the sower. If we follow Matthew's narrative, this is Jesus' first public parable. Jesus was already a popular teacher at this point in time. In fact, he's so popular that he was nearly trampled to death by the crowd of people who had come to hear him, some out of curiosity, I'm sure some hoping to see miracles that he was already renowned for, some coming to mock or find fault. But he has a crowd of people around him to the point where he's almost taken over by the crowd. So he's so crowded, in fact, by the mob that he actually gets on a boat and goes into the middle of the lake. And that's where he's going to deliver this parable. As we said in the introduction in the parables, Jesus takes an ordinary scene. In fact, there could have been a man sowing a seed on one of the hillsides around the lake. These are scenes that his audience would have been easily able to relate to, and he takes the ordinary in order to teach us something quite profound and extraordinary. In the parable, 4 kinds of ground are mentioned. And so what we're going to do is look at each kind of ground, and then we'll go back and look at the conditions. Of course, the application that we're supposed to make is the condition of the heart. The way the farmland was laid out in Palestine, everybody didn't necessarily have their own field. In fact, there was public ground that was divided into long rows, which each man could plant as he wished. These strips would have not been fenced off, but they would have had a narrow passageway in between each row. And the footpath would have been 2 or 3 feet wide, and anyone could walk up and down them. And as a result of all this movement and all this foot traffic, the ground becomes hard. It becomes like pavement. It was the wayside. This is beaten down. It's dried out, and it becomes a lot like cement. It was the walkway that led between these rows that was the means for people to get in and plant their crops. Any seed that fell there would not have much luck. If it would like having a seed fall in the middle of a motorway somewhere. There wasn't any chance that the seed was going to get into the ground to take root. The birds would make an easy meal of it if the seed fell on this ground. He also considers another kind of ground that would have been present in these Palestinian fields, and that is the rocky ground. And the rocky way, it isn't actually talking about ground that has rocks in it necessarily. In Palestine, there's a lot of places where the soil is shallow. And so there is some soil on top, but in the bedrock and the foundation, there's this limestone would have been. That's the rocky ground. It's soil on top, but there's no depth to it. A seed falling there might sprout quickly, but the water and the nourishment from the soil that it needs to grow just simply isn't found. And so the plant quickly withers away and dies. It's shallow. The third kind of ground is the thorny ground. And from the view, initially, this ground actually could look pretty good. It's easy enough to make a garden look neat simply by turning over the soil. If any of you garden, you know that if you just flip the soil a little bit, you can hide a lot of the weeds and the roots and the other seeds that are there. However, if the dirt isn't cleared, if a farmer doesn't eventually clear his field of weeds and roots and other seeds or old seeds, then the garden's not going to stay neat for very long. In the thorny ground, the weeds are still there. Even if they can't be seen, and they grow more strongly than the good seed, until the good seed is simply just choked out, killed, and replaced by more weeds. This is a ground that just isn't tended to very carefully. Finally, Jesus says there is good ground or good soil. And this is the ground that's soft enough to take the seed. It has depth enough for the seed to grow and to be nourished and to get the things that it needs from the soil. And it's clean enough to give the seed a good chance to grow. This is a well-tended patch of land. In most fields in Palestine, all of these kinds of soil would be present. Everyone in Jesus's audience understands the picture that he creates. And now, what he wants his hearer to do is judge which soil is best. If you were a farmer, where would you concentrate your seed? It's an easy judgment to make. The parables are meant to bring us to a critical decision. But the answer is obvious until we have to make application to our own hearts. Just as all the types of soil are present in any field, in his audience, all of those types of hearts are present as well. And he calls them to decide. It's what he calls us to do as well. He makes us ask, what kind of soil am I? One of the things that I find interesting about this parable is that the seed is always the same. The word of God is always good seed. The impact that the good seed has in each individual depends on the condition of the soil, of the heart and the mind of the hearer. The seed doesn't change. It doesn't alter its nature. It's always the same. The way that it is received is what changes. So we're going to go back and look at each condition of the heart, starting with the wayside seed. I hope you'll join me for that next time, and we'll continue this study of the parable of the sower.